All right, well, hi everyone. Welcome to today's demo. I'm Jennifer Fleury, Director of Business Alliances for MercuryGate, and I'm pleased to welcome today Jason Kerner from Project 44. As many of you know, Project 44 was selected as our Technology Partner of the Year for 2017. And my hope is that when you see their demo today, you will understand how they earned that distinction. So with that, Jason, I will let you go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everybody, for joining the call today. As Jen mentioned, we're very happy to be on this call, and we really value the strategic relationship that we have with MercuryGate. There's a few things that we want to cover today. A little bit more about the partnership that Project 44 has with MercuryGate. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of Project 44 in general. I know there's probably many on this call that are familiar with some of our initial solutions and our initial relationship with MercuryGate. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then what I'm going to do from there is talk a little bit about the unique value proposition and then give a solution update on some of the key new features and modes that have recently been added to the MercuryGate solution as part of the Project 44 partnership. At the end, I'll make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions if you have any. And throughout the process, what I'm really looking to do is provide some context as to Project 44 and the value proposition, and then when we get into the solution update portion, I'm going to actually tie in some screenshots of the actual MercuryGate product so you can see how that integration really works and that experience as we move forward with these solutions. So with that, a few notes about our relationship with MercuryGate. We established the initial relationship and partnership back in 2016 when we actually integrated the entire LTL lifecycle within MercuryGate's TMS. So this includes everything starting with rating and transit time, being able to do real-time dispatching, tracking, and all the way up to document retrieval. And from there, as you're going to learn today, we really expanded on that relationship and the modes that we've integrated with MercuryGate. Now, the way that we do this, and as we peel back some layers, you'll understand a little bit more detail, is we've actually created, in collaboration with MercuryGate, what we call a global configuration. What this does is allows companies to quickly take advantage of Project 44's one-to-many normalized network across modes within MercuryGate so that you can leverage this cutting-edge technology and move away from legacy solutions such as EDI, such as things like SMC3, and manual processes that are inhibiting your automation and optimization today. And as Jen mentioned on the intro, we were awarded their 2017 Technology Partner of the Year Award, which we are very proud to receive. We have a very long-term strategic relationship in mind and moving forward with MercuryGate, and we have a lot of dedicated resources when it comes to MercuryGate integration and supporting MercuryGate's customers. So, okay, for those of you that aren't really familiar with Project 44, who are we? And why has MercuryGate decided to have this relationship with us? We provide the industry's only end-to-end solution for multimodal transportation when it comes to the life cycle, when it comes to a one-to-many network, and be able to normalize that data. What that really means for you as a MercuryGate customer is you now have the ability to have a single endpoint to your MercuryGate TMS that exposes a one-to-many network across modes of all of your capacity providers. This eliminates not only the need for MercuryGate for the carriers as well as you to have to set up these discrete connections to all of your different carriers across modes, things like EDI or FTP or manual processes. By having a single entry point to an API network, that heavy lifting of the integration is taken care of by the Project 44 solution. And so what that means for you, and actually even for MercuryGate, is they focus on that core UI, the core workflow and execution of freight, and they allow Project 44 to handle all the complexities of the integration and normalization of the data across all of your capacity providers. We're going to dig a little bit into that with some visuals, but at a high level, multimodal end-to-end automation and visibility is the solution that Project 44 is bringing into MercuryGate's TMS for the benefit of their customers. So why Project 44, and why did we go down this path of a one-to-many normalized network for freight? Well, a big part of it has to do with what we think of as information asymmetry. What that really means is, in the current state and with the legacy technologies and processes that most companies have to deal with today, is that there's not consistency of the information that you as a shipper or a 3PL have and what the information and access to that data that, say, the carriers on your network have. So what that leads to is lost information, mismatched account numbers, lost status updates because a unique identifier for that shipment hasn't been passed end to end from the shipper or the 3PL, from the TMS, all the way through to the carrier system. So this leads to a lot of inefficiencies. It leads to a lot of things like manual processes for check calls or invoicing inaccuracies. One of the ways that we overcome this is by being able to automate those processes with APIs. If we take a look at what some of the leading industry analysts and other industry sources say, there are a lot of benefits to adding this layer of automation and optimization, but if you wait, there's a cost. So if you take a look at a few statistics on the screen here, doing things the way that they're done today with those manual processes or legacy technologies within any TMS is you're wasting 50% of your workers' time for hunting for data, trying to correct mismatched data, updating incorrect fields. The reason for this is there's no automation via APIs. Another interesting statistic from the Harvard Review is 89% of companies today compete on customer experience. Hopefully that's not something that's new to everybody on the phone. Customer experience has really become a competitive differentiator across all industries and allows you to have a greater share of wallet. And it is not uncommon for customers to switch on customer experience alone and even be willing to pay a premium if they're receiving a superior experience. Well, if you look at how things are being done today, when you have legacy technology and manual processes, you cannot have a competitive advantage of customer experience. And the only way to get there, and something I'm sure we're all aware of, this Amazon effect we always hear about, to be able to compete and provide that level of experience that most people have come accustomed to because of consumerization, is by adopting leading-edge technologies to add automation, to add real-time data. That's what's going to allow you to get to the level of customer experience to be competitive. And then if you look at that last statistic, before we jump in a little bit more of the product, is 79% of organizations have inadequate visibility into the supply chain. That is not just at the shipment level, that could be both upstream and downstream. And much of that is because of a lack of automation, a lack of technology, such as APIs that allow that end-to-end flow of data. And so that's really what Project 44 is enabling, if you peel back a few layers, is we're adding that shared version of truth. We're allowing the flow of data to go end-to-end to your capacity providers from your TMS, from within MercuryGate. And what we mean by that is a single point of entry into the Project 44 network, real-time data exchange via APIs, so you no longer have mismatch information, latency due to EDI transactions, inaccuracies due to data entry because of a manual process. By adding that integration in a normalized one-to-many network, you're able to streamline and add new levels of automation that, quite frankly, you cannot do without APIs. So one of the key benefits of Project 44, and I mentioned the term normalization, is let's take LTL as an example, because that's where Project 44 really has its roots, and then we moved on to additional modes. But let's think about all of the different carriers that you have on your network that send freight for you. Within the LTL network, there is no standard across things like accessorial codes. There's no standard across things like status updates. So what that means is there has to be mappings and business logic within your TMS to accommodate for the different codes that each carrier is returning to you. Yes, MercuryGate can handle those sorts of things, but there's a better way of doing it. There's a better way to automate that. And that is one of the key differentiators of Project 44's solution, is that all of the data flowing in from the different carriers is normalized into a standard set of codes and descriptions and data format so that it's a consistent flow of data, a consistent normalized set of codes and information that's returned into MercuryGate. So there is no longer a need to have extensive client-side logic to accommodate for all of those disparate codes and updates that are being returned by the different carriers on your network. If you take a look at the screen, these are actually real-world examples that we pulled out. On the left, you see LGDEL. Well, that is a normalized value that Project 44 has for liftgate delivery, a very common accessorial. What you see above that funnel are actual representations and examples from different carriers as to how in their system they actually code and represent a liftgate accessorial. Essentially, what we are doing is taking all of those different codes, doing those mappings and normalization for you, for the carriers, and passing back a single point of truth, a single view of that information to LGVEL. And that's both on the request side and on the response side. So as you can imagine, if you have a large carrier network, there's a lot of overhead and manual mappings that's now eliminated by having normalization in the middle. You can also see in the example next to that, delivered. Well, you would think that'd be a pretty simple, pretty easy to handle status code when it comes to milestones for a volume LTL shipment or a traditional LTL shipment. Again, after looking at just a small sample of 50 of our carriers that are on the Project 44 network, we came across over 38 different representations of the delivered code. So once again, we take all of those different codes and values and normalize it so that client-side logic doesn't have to exist in the TMS, and there's no need to constantly update those mappings on the TMS side when a carrier decides to make a change, make an accessorial, or change a coding. So normalization is a key when it comes to providing that information symmetry, making sure that you have that consistent view, that single version of the truth, end-to-end between your system and the carriers. So how does that really look, though, in a world where we're using MercuryGate as our TMS? Well, as you can see on the screen, I'm going to show you a logical representation, a logical architecture of how this really works. On the left-hand side, you can see that this can be a solution for 3PLs or shippers who are leveraging MercuryGate as their leading-edge TMS. And then in the middle, one of the things that's very important to note is it's always about execution and visibility. You may see solutions out there today that talk about truckload visibility or other visibility for shipments. But most importantly is that you have the execution both upstream and downstream to really augment and enhance that visibility. So within MercuryGate, what you have today with several of the modes, including LTL and Volume LTL, is the ability via APIs to fully automate in real time the rate quoting, the transit time information, being able to dispatch that load and get that automatic confirmation within MercuryGate, and then have the ability to automatically kick off tracking jobs. Because what's happening is a valid pro number, for example, is being returned by the carrier in real time, so tracking can be initiated immediately. And then from a visibility standpoint, it's not an EDI 214 that you're waiting hours upon hours for with very limited value and data included. You're actually being able to have MercuryGate receive in real time via a push status updates and milestones as they occur, exceptions as they occur, so that you actually can do exception management and make decisions based on real-time information, not batched latent data that you would have from a manual process or say something like EDI. And then ultimately, a lot of other processes downstream can be kicked off if you have the appropriate documentation. And Project 44 provides that same capability of retrieving a document such as a POD within MercuryGate, have a BOL or a WNI or other documents associated with that shipment automatically be pushed and placed within MercuryGate for you to review, consume, and then kick off additional processes maybe around invoicing or accounts payable. What you have on the right side, which I've just put on the screen, is really where Project 44 plays. We sit in the middle as a one-to-many normalized network between MercuryGate and all the different modes of transportation that you need and you use with your different carriers. We've just talked about LTL and Volume LTL, but we also have full truckload, which is something that we're going to talk about as part of the solution update that MercuryGate has just introduced. And then you can see rail and parcel, and the value here is you have a single integration point for all of your modes, and as you change your mix of carriers across modes, or as you add additional modes to your business, with Project 44 and MercuryGate, the integration is already there. You don't have to do one-offs or discrete connections to the different carriers across modes, because that's taken care of for you, so you focus on your core business, and MercuryGate focuses on providing a superior customer experience within their application. So we've talked a lot about this one-to-many network. Well, what does that really mean, and just how much do we really provide you? Because there may be a lot of different carriers across a lot of different modes that you deal with that are going to be very important to execute your business. Well, if you look at the LTL capacity domestically, we have up to 99% of available LTL carriers on our network. based on the volume, weighted average. What this means is, as you go out to RFP every year, every other year, and if you decide to change your volume or your LTL carrier mix, they're already on the Project 44 network, and it's a configuration task within MercuryGate to quickly add them, add the appropriate account information and credentials, get the security via an API key, and now within minutes, not months, you've got new carriers added and ready to be accessed and used within your network. If you look at volume LTL from a capacity standpoint, if you look at the weighted average of the shipments out there today, 75%. Most of that is made up by 3 or 4, and we've already expanded beyond 8 of those carriers and continue to add them on a weekly basis. 91,000 is a very big number when we talk about full truckload carriers. We're going to get into how we actually come to that number, and it has to do with being able to leverage all available technology across any full truckload carrier, regardless of their size and regardless of their technology maturity. And one last note before we dig a little bit more into the product itself and how it really works within MercuryGate is you see down at the bottom there the FedEx logo. Project 44 has a very strategic relationship with FedEx Freight, and in fact we are the first and only technology provider as part of their API integration program. So what that really means is we strategically work with FedEx Freight on their APIs directly, on their API roadmap, and we are their preferred approach for actually automation via their APIs. So now let's get a little bit into the solution update. One of the reasons that we wanted to have this call is to let existing MercuryGate customers know, as well as a lot of interested parties understand, that we have gone beyond LTL within MercuryGate, and MercuryGate and Project 44 have recently collaborated to bring full truckload visibility into MercuryGate, as well as Volume LTL full life cycle. So let's talk a little bit about what that means with the truckload visibility piece. We're very excited to release this because we have a very unique solution when it comes to providing truckload visibility. First and foremost, there are 3 key methods for how you can actually get the visibility for a full truckload shipment. The first one I want to mention, I'm sure that everybody's very familiar with because of the mandate that recently came down, is via ELDs. So many of the larger carriers who've been planning for this new regulation have the ELDs in place for hours of service, but a great side effect is also that they provide location information. So whether that be OmniTrack, PeopleNet, Rand McNally, those are just a few examples of the ELDs that we have direct integration with to provide visibility. Another common method that we support is app-less mobile phone tracking. It's very important that you pay attention to the app-less piece of it, because what we've seen in the market is drivers are very tired of having to install a new application and figure out which app they're supposed to be using for which shipment, and the fact that they don't want to have battery life drained because of running multiple apps. With Project 44, an application is not required. You can initiate tracking within MercuryGate, and it's initialized without having an application on that driver's phone if an ELD is not available. And that's the only interaction that driver will have to have once he opts in via an SMS message. The rest is behind the scenes, and the driver is never bothered again with an application download, manually entering an update, or any other manual task. The third one, which is pretty unique to Project 44 because of our extensive domain experience due to our founders and the executives on our team, is direct carrier integration or direct carrier tracking. What this really means is it's very similar to what you can do with LTL, is we've worked very closely with the very large carriers to start, and we've actually worked with them to build out an API to put on our network so that we can do direct integration, and that allows you to bypass a third party for tracking, such as an ELD or such as having to use a phone. And what this ultimately leads to is that we have the ability to provide the best available location information for your full truckload shipments, because we support any and all methods that are available to provide that location and visibility information. Now you see on the slide here, so what capabilities are really built in behind the scenes when you're using MercuryGate and Project 44's truckload visibility solution? Well, there's 5 key things that I would like to highlight, and this is certainly not a full list, but for this call I think it gives you a really good idea of some of the capabilities. We mentioned how there's the ELD, API, and phone options for getting the data, but then you look at the ease of initializing a truckload shipment, getting the status of a shipment, updating shipment details, maybe things around a location has changed, the driver's information has changed, There could be different things around consignee information. It's important that you have the ability to make updates to a shipment once it's actually in transit. Being able to delete a shipment, maybe it was canceled and I don't want it tracked, I don't want it in the UI, I don't want it in MercuryGate anymore, having that ability. But what's really interesting is number 5 here, that is a pretty unique differentiator for us, is the ability to actually get out and determine what are the actual tracking methods available from the full truckload carriers on your network. What that really means is we have an API that can go out and make a call to our platform and look and see if the various carriers have a direct API for integration. Do they have an ELD that you can get a data sharing agreement in place for? Or does it have something like only a driver's phone that's the available method for tracking? We actually can determine the available methods and the best method and the best data that's going to be available so that you can make a decision and we can automate that for you. So that's very critical because many carriers will have more than one option, but they may not expose all of those options to you as an end user. So let's talk about that. So what I have now for the sake of this demo and this demonstration essentially is I've worked with MercuryGate directly to kind of pull in some of the key screenshots rather than doing a live demo because I didn't want to insult you with test data that wasn't actually pulling things in real time. And what I want to do is walk through how at the end of the day, Project 44 is enhancing your MercuryGate investment. We're not replacing the screens. What we're doing is providing you a richer integration method. We're providing real-time data that gives you more actionable insight to then run your business. So this first screen that I show here is an example of within MercuryGate, and all existing users should be familiar with this, is that control tower view. Well, with Project 44, you're going to have the best, most real-time data around LTL, volume LTL, full truckload, because we're feeding that information into MercuryGate in real time. So as you can see here as an example, you can very quickly go within MercuryGate and select the different types of shipments maybe you're interested in, what's been delivered across modes, what are current loads, etc. To go down a little bit deeper, and maybe I want to see a list view of all of the shipments that I have in play. MercuryGate with Project 44 gives you the ability to list them based on multi-modes. I could have my truckload, my LTL, and see kind of this macro view, and you can see what I've highlighted here is an example of, in this list you see an LTL shipment that Project 44 would be allowing you to do real-time execution, dispatch, tracking, and document retrieval. But now what you're also going to see, which is new, is the ability to have truckload shipments being updated in real time from a visibility perspective from Project 44. So I've highlighted that as well. Now if we take another look, this is an example of normalization. This is another view of tracking and all the different status codes that are being returned, say, for a specific shipment within MercuryGate. You can see things such as arrived at pickup location, updates around the ETA, updates about when it actually arrived at a location. These are examples of milestone information. What you're also going to see in subsequent slides is we can provide real-time geolocation in the MercuryGate as well. So MercuryGate provides a very intuitive UI to display not only a macro view of your shipments for full truckload and other modes, but also a detailed view of not only the current activity, the most recent update, but a history of the updates for that shipment as well. The important thing is when you're leveraging MercuryGate with Project 44, this information is coming in normalized and this information is coming in real time, so it's always going to be accurate and up to date when you need to make decisions around an ETA. And that could be both on the inbound as well as on the outbound side. Now you see what I mentioned in this box here is dynamic ETA. Project 44's solution is taking into account real-world variables such as road conditions, road closures, traffic, weather, and using that information behind the scenes to actually provide the most accurate ETA information. On this topic of ETA, if you look at this next screen, here's an example of a shipment detail screen, and you can see that I've circled ETA. That is an example of an ETA that when leveraging Project 44, the information is being updated in real time based on real-world activity. And that is very critical when you think of things around, planning line haul or trying to alleviate things like dock congestion. Having a real-world picture of when something is going to arrive allows you to be much more efficient and optimize your operations across docks and terminals in general. You can also see some of the other items that I circled here to give you an idea of the depth of detail that MercuryGate can represent with the Project 44 feed. Last shipment date, last status detail. This is another view of where you can see not only kind of the most recent activity, but also see a quick, say, breadcrumb view or list view of the history of the activities based on the API information that's been delivered. What's also nice about MercuryGate is in addition to the real-time data feed that we're providing and the real-time location information, is MercuryGate allows you to do some pretty interesting things about like adding notes to a shipment in real time so that anybody that's actually interacting or viewing that information will see the latest information or notes from another user so that you always have the most updated information, whether it be from the API or as a user being able to add a note that's very easily accessible from within the system. Kind of coming back a little bit to the benefits of having this real-time information coming into MercuryGate and then also a comprehensive UI that MercuryGate provides is being able to have things like visual indicators based on real-time data. So you can see here what we indicated. Those 3 dots means that there's an exception and that a shipment or a pickup is running late. So having the ability to not only have visuals around that, but then also set up alerts and notifications is very powerful. So imagine being able to have real-time information around, say, ETA information or geofencing information when you wanted to know something was 20 minutes out, 30 minutes out, knowing when something was 2 hours late, 3 hours late, because that's a threshold for your business where you'd want to take action. It's not enough just to have a visual indicator within a UI, but having the power of an API and a TMS that gives you the ability to set up custom alerts based on custom business rules is very powerful. And the most efficient businesses actually manage based on exception management versus, give me 1,000 updates and I'll try to make sense of it. What's really most important is being able to set up business rules within your TMS, like MercuryGate, and being able to say, I want to know when X happens. I want to know when this ETA has changed, because that is what allows you to ultimately manage your business in a much more optimal fashion. So exception management is key. And without Project 44's APIs feeding that data in real time, it's just not possible to do that at a very efficient level. Another interesting data point that I wanted to call out that MercuryGate is able to display is when you, again, thinking about what can you do with the real-time information. So whether it be an ELD or a driver's phone or even a direct API, information such as how many miles to the next stop. It's that type of information that you're able to get in real time that behind the scenes contributes to being able to update an ETA, but it also gives you a real-time view of status. Like, wait a minute, they've only traveled 100 miles since the last update or since they last the last stop. You now have visual representation of that and a quick way to see that information in real time. And this can be at the stop level, so for each stop you can see how far away, how far have they actually traveled. And this again ties back into the very important capability of exception management. And I can't stress enough that this is really about enhancing MercuryGate, enhancing the experience, and Project 44 is not replacing MercuryGate screens, we're just enhancing the data and the real-time nature of it and the richness of that data. So this allows you to ultimately get more out of your MercuryGate investment, and that's the entire part and strategy around this relationship. I think the final slide around truckload visibility before we talk a little bit about the volume LTL capabilities is you can see within MercuryGate they have mapping capabilities. They leverage Google, as you can see very clearly on the screen. But when you pair their mapping capabilities with the Project 44 solution, you're actually getting real-time information and be able to see in real time the latest ping of, say, that shipment. This only shows like 3 pings and you see an origin destination. In a real-world setting with Project 44, you could potentially see pings from 10, 20, 100 plus locations. And that could be very interesting from a dashboard perspective, but going back to the exception management piece, you can set up alerts based on proximity to a specific location, based on ETA to a specific stop. So not only do you have the exception management piece, but MercuryGate and Project 44 provide you the ability to see all of the stops and the actual history of the pings and the location on a very intuitive map. What I'd like to talk about now is actually switching to another very important update that MercuryGate has made to their TMS, is they have now incorporated the industry's first automated set of APIs for Volume LTL. So many of you who have any experience with Volume LTL, it's probably been very much pick up the phone, make a phone call, multiple phone calls, and it's just a very manual process before being able to get that quote for a volume shipment. Typically when we talk about Volume LTL, it's like 12 to 28 linear feet, greater than 10,000 pounds. Some carriers may have different definitions, but that's a pretty standard one. And there is a lot of value to actually doing a Volume LTL quote versus maybe getting an overage on a traditional LTL quote. And what Project 44 has done is actually worked with the major Volume LTL carriers to create the full life cycle of Volume LTL APIs to automate that process and add new levels of efficiency within MercuryGate. So let's take a look. What does that really mean? Well, there's a couple things that are required for a Volume LTL shipment that you don't need for a regular LTL shipment. First and foremost is you need linear feet. It's all about linear feet, and that's how they're going to calculate a rate for you, whether it be FedEx or any of the other carriers. So we see at a screen, many of you who have used MercuryGate in the past for regular LTL, you're going to see that's a very similar experience. It's really just a matter of selecting from the mode drop-down volume versus what you would potentially be selecting for traditional LTL. And then you'll also see that once you make that selection, you now have the ability and the requirement to enter linear feet. By doing this, you are now able to, via APIs within MercuryGate, to automate the process of getting rate requests for volume shipments. And those requests are going to be returned with valid quote numbers that you can ultimately use and select to then do a dispatch and have that entire life cycle of tracking and documenting, just like traditional LTL. This next screen is just a representation of the rates that are being returned in real time. This should look very familiar to existing users. This is what it would look like pretty much for traditional LTL, but now we've given you the ability and the enhancement to actually return the volume rates. And so it's going to look very familiar, and that's key because it's not a matter of adding these modes and having to train users on new screens or train them on new pieces of software. This integration is all baked right into the existing MercuryGate platform, and it's really just a matter of selecting these new modes from the existing screens and workflows. A few of the other things that I want to mention. So we've talked about two new modes in addition to what we've already have in place with the MercuryGate Project 44 relationship, is that customer experience is key to Project 44 just as it is to MercuryGate. And we have a dedicated onboarding team, and really what that means is when a customer decides to leverage Project 44 with MercuryGate, we have a dedicated team that basically manages that project along with MercuryGate and our customer to ensure a very timely, very streamlined onboarding process, enablement and training so that you have great success right out of the gate and it's a great experience moving forward. When you leverage Project 44, we also manage the support process, so we own those relationships to the carriers. We are constantly monitoring all APIs on our network, which is critical. And what that means is not only do we have all the APIs on our network, we do what's called carrier health checks. So on a quarterly basis, we actually provide data back to all the different carriers across the different modes on how their APIs are responding and performing compared to others on the network. So that allows them to continuously improve those APIs, whether it be around scalability, whether it be around response time and performance, because it's very critical that that network is able to meet all SLAs and business requirements of our users, whether that be shippers or 3PLs. And uptime, we guarantee 99.8%. We have never, as a solution, missed an SLA number, missed an uptime number. And a big part of that is because of the high availability and the great levels of redundancy that the platform has been built with. No single points of failure, just as you would expect with any enterprise solution. Stateless nodes, which really what that means is the ability to scale up and scale down, maybe during peak seasons or as increased demand happens. So there's never going to be an issue with availability or performance on the network. So I know we've covered quite a bit. We talked about not only the existing solutions that we started off with MercuryGate around LTL, but what we really wanted to announce was also the full truckload and volume LTL modes that are now available in MercuryGate. A few things I just want to kind of call out before we open it up to questions and open discussion is that ultimately Project 44 is a pure API play. There are other solutions out there that are providing, say, visibility information as a niche player and focusing on actually behind the scenes doing spreadsheet uploads and maybe masking EDI transactions or check calls with an API. Project 44 does not do anything with legacy technology. We're not masking any manual processes behind the scenes, whether it be EDI, whether it be manual uploads of spreadsheets. It's all in real time. It is all via true APIs to the carriers, and that is a huge differentiator for our platform. Some of the other things that are really important to note, and I think you've seen this through the walkthrough of the screens in our solution, is that with MercuryGate and Project 44, it's not just about visibility, it's about execution. There are a lot of solutions out there that can do very point visibility solutions, but they don't go beyond that. They don't add the execution pieces around rating and transit times and dispatching and document retrieval. And that's a real key differentiator, and that's one reason we partnered with MercuryGate, is they know that it's much more valuable to have execution and visibility rather than just a straight visibility solution. I'm going to stop there and open it up to questions. I have a few colleagues in the room, and if there's any comments, they'll also help answer questions or add additional color as needed. So Jen, I'd like to turn it over for questions if we have any. Any questions? If there aren't any questions on the line or if folks are having trouble unmuting, one of the things that we will absolutely do as a follow-up is send contact information and links to the recording so that if there are any specific questions for MercuryGate and or Project 44, you'll have the ability to reach out and get additional literature and content or speak to somebody about maybe your specific business case or questions. So Jen, we'll leave it open for a few more minutes, or just let me know how you'd like to proceed.
Hi there, this is Scott Pyle with Blunt International. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. My question kind of relates to, like, if we chose to kind of jump in and get integrated with Project 44 with our current MercuryGate setup, down the road, if some sort of malfunction takes place and we think that there's an issue with our MercuryGate software, who do we call? Do we call MercuryGate or do we call Project 44?
So that's a good question, and so there's a couple different things that we would do on that. First and foremost is that Project 44 has dedicated support. So when you are a customer subscribing to Project 44, whether you're using MercuryGate or any other system, you do have a direct support relationship with Project 44 where we would help troubleshoot and determine where that has happened. One of the things that we didn't really get into, and this is another part of kind of what I call that magic in the middle, is aside from normalization, we also have a lot of logic and capabilities around retries and failures and error handling. So essentially, we will be reporting throughout the entire process, if there was an issue, where did it happen? Did it happen at the carrier side? Was there an error or something happened on the Project 44 side, or did something happen within the TMS itself? So to answer your question, you will have a direct support relationship with Project 44 where we would take full ownership of any issues, and if we needed to work directly with MercuryGate on resolution, we would own that, not you. You wouldn't have to go back and forth to multiple parties to solve an issue. We would own that.
Okay.
Another thing I'll add, just because that's a very good question about the technical nature and the support nature of the relationship, is that the Project 44 and the MercuryGate product teams work very closely on actual aligning roadmaps. So if you think further down, as MercuryGate makes enhancements, as Project 44 makes enhancements, we are in lockstep on how and when those features are going to be introduced into the MercuryGate product, as well as timing and messaging around that as well. So that's also, I think, very important in that relationship. All right, is there anything else I can answer? If not, Jen, I may just turn it back over to you.
Sorry, Jason, I guess I was on mute.
You were on mute, that's okay.
I was asking several times, but nobody heard. If somebody wanted to get started on Project 44, who would they contact from the sales side at your company?
It's a great question. I'll jump in for this one. This is Nate Piskaric with Project 44. I'm a director of sales and account management over here. So I would be the point of contact. In the follow-up that Jason will have sent out with the recording, my contact info will be on there as well.
And, you know, to add a little context to that, in addition to providing the contact for further conversations, you know, we're very flexible when it comes to demos and testing in a test environment. So there's a lot of different ways that companies can test or explore the solution.
Are there any further questions? All right, well, you can reach out to me at MercuryGate if you have any business-related questions on the partnership. My name is Jennifer Fleury, and that's JENIFER.FLEURY@mercurygate.com. If you have technical questions, you can reach out to your implementer. And if you have sales-related questions, you can reach out to Project 44.
I have a question if I could ask one.
Sure.
Let's say you have a bunch of existing EDI connections already in place and various API calls that you've set up through MercuryGate. How would those transition over as part of a project with Project 44?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We would take a look at, and this can be, it's very common to do things in a phased approach or a phased rollout based on what your existing connections are and kind of where you would want to start. But essentially, any EDI connections that you had set up today within the LTL or Volume LTL world, for example, would be completely eliminated and obsolete. And what would happen is you would be set up to then integrate via that single integration point, that one-to-many network, to those carriers via API credentials. If you have existing kind of one-to-one discrete API connections today, you would essentially be able to migrate those into that single connection. So chances are your credentials, your API key, that sort of information is the same. You now no longer have to manage all those individual connections. It's just a single connection to Project 44. And I guess one other thing I would add to that quickly is a typical integration is essentially, it's a task. You would open up an ACE task with MercuryGate, and that would actually kick off the implementation process. Like we discussed, it's configuration versus development because the integration is already complete.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining the call today. I have recorded this, so if you would like to get the recording, you can reach out to your implementer or engagement manager. If you don't have one of those, you can reach out to myself. and I will provide this to Project 44 as well.
All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time today. Jen, thank you for giving us a time slot.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone.